to the Wandering Star Farmhouse. It is August and we are participating in the Every Bit Counts Food Preservation Challenge from Three Rivers Homestead. So the idea is that we're going to be preserving something or trying to preserve something every day of the month. We've already gotten started with food preservation out of the garden this summer. I have my soft net garlic all braided. I need to clip off the roots now that it's all dried. And we're gonna be getting to braiding onions soon and storing all sorts of other things. I started off the month, August 1st, with a bang, accomplishing nothing. But last year I counted other steps towards food preservation on those days as well. So I'm gonna count some purchasing that I did as counting for the first day of the challenge. So I actually was able to find a food saver on clearance, $35 off for vacuum sealing. And this is something I'm really excited to use this year. Vacuum sealing is really good for when you're gonna be freezing things. So last year I froze corn. I'm gonna be freezing some more green beans probably. And another really important thing is for my homemade cheeses that I'm making. My first homemade cheese wheel, I used a friend's vacuum sealer and it turned out great. The second wheel of cheese I made, I was like, maybe I'll just put it in a Ziploc bag and suck out all the air. That didn't work. It completely molded. So vacuum sealer for home cheese making too. And they had some rolls of the vacuum sealing bags that they were clearancing out as well. This is something I found was very interesting. This is the old boxes, the old packaging, 11 inches by 16 feet. The new packages that they're selling in the food saver section are 11 inches by 12 feet. So there's shrinkflation for you at work in the local store near you. I also picked up some more half-gallon ball jars, and the first thing I'm going to be doing with these is harvesting the last of my cabbages and making sauerkraut. So that'll be happening sometime soon, and I needed some more half-gallon size jars to do that. That was my first day on the Every Bit Counts challenge. Day 2, August 2nd, we needed to take care of a homestead chore and process a couple of roosters from our flock of Delawares that we picked up earlier this spring. Are there 6 hens in the Delawares?
Yes, 6 Delaware.
Okay, so we have 6 Delaware hens, and then we actually also have our Mystic Morans with them as well, and those 3 are all hens as well. So that's 9 hens and 1 rooster. That's enough roosters. So we had to process the 2 superfluous roosters, and so Jeremy took care of that in the morning, and I got started with making some chicken stock. So I started out with the spices. I used just the ball canning recipe. I started out with the spices of salt and peppercorns and bay leaves. I harvested some celery to add in and used an onion from our storage. I'm about to move over to using our homegrown onions, but I just have to use the last couple of onions that we had bought from the store. And then I put in the 2 chickens and the peeled feet as well. And peeled feet are excellent for stock making. They just have a lot of gelatin and collagen in them. So I boiled those for a couple of hours, and then I strained everything out of that broth and put the broth in a bowl to chill in the fridge. And that is as far as I got to on that project on August 2nd. So today is August 3rd. I am going to be getting that broth into jars and pressure canning that today. But the reason why I chilled the broth first is because I'm going to remove the fat layer from off the top of the broth. Apparently I spoke too soon. There is not a lick of fat on this broth. They were scrawny little yard birds apparently. I could see like a teensy bit of fat. So I have to heat this back up to boiling and then I'll start filling the jars. But this gelatin is another reason why I didn't know if I wanted to pressure can, because I kind of heard that maybe pressure canning destroyed the gelatin. I've been doing a little bit more research into that too, and
yeah, that's like you're pouring meat jello.
I am.
It's amazing.
It's so good for your body. It seems like I've seen lots of examples of people showing their pressure canned broth still still getting a full gel when it's refrigerated. So I think that it will be worth it to have the convenience of having some canned. I did some research. The fat layer, it didn't make a lot of sense to me with my Whole Foods eating understanding of why I would want to remove the fat. So some people talk about the fat interfering with the seal. That obviously could be a problem. But another issue is the fat going rancid, because I've already boiled these chickens for a couple of hours. And so now if I was to then pressure can that fat and then maybe, and leave it stored for who knows how long, that fat can go rancid. So I'm going to be skimming off the fat, but I'm not going to be throwing that away. I'm going to be saving that in a jar, and that fat is what I use then if I'm going to make a soup. I use some of that fat and put it in the pan, cook up my onions and carrots and celery, my mirepoix, and then I'll be pouring in the broth. So it all ends up back in the same soup basically, or some other fat, right? Like maybe I end up using that schmaltz, that chicken fat, for something else, and then I'll use bacon grease for the soup or whatever. But so it's all staying within the system of eating the whole foods, but I just am not going to be canning the stock with the fat on it. And my last reason for not pressure canning any chicken stock before is I actually only have my pressure canner is actually only big enough for pints, and usually when I use broth I'm using a full quart of broth. But I think that just for the sake of being able to have this shelf stable, I'm going to go ahead and can up some chicken stock. The last thing I am doing today is making sure that all the jars that I have left over from last year are marked with the year 2022, so that as I start to add my cans this year, my jars this year, I will know which ones to use first. A few days ago, I went out to my tomato field and started to pick the first blushing Roma tomatoes. And they were just starting to color, some of them, but I decided to bring them in because we're having some rain right now and let them ripen on the counter. And so here they are 2 days later, and they're looking beautiful and ripe. Today, August 4th, I'm going to can up these tomatoes into some diced tomatoes. And I'm not going to peel these. I'm just going to leave it like it is right now, because the thing is, this first flush of tomatoes, they're kind of small. Like a lot of the tomatoes on the bushes are much larger, some of the green ones that are not ripe yet. And so I really hate peeling tomatoes. So I just didn't want to mess with peeling these because they're so small, and I had to, there's just so many of them. But I am coring them and dicing them up to put them in a pot. The only other time I've canned tomatoes was this time my mother-in-law bought me a box of tomatoes as a part of this kind of produce buying club that she used to get for us sometimes. And I just remember that time after working with the tomatoes all day, like my hands were stinging and burning from the acid from the tomatoes. So, but maybe I'll get some gloves next time I do a big processing day. I decided to heat these up and do a hot pack for diced tomatoes. And one of the reasons why is when you start to cook things just a little bit, they soften. And so you can fit more of the vegetable in the canning jar when they're a little bit soft, as opposed to trying to raw pack them. I was able to get enough to fill up 4 pint jars in this first set of diced tomatoes. And you just add a half a teaspoon salt, canning salt, and a tablespoon of lemon juice to the jars so that they have enough acidity, and a little bit of salt, and then they're ready to go. But I like to use diced tomatoes for our burrito filling recipe that I have. I also like to use diced tomatoes in chili and some other soups that we make. So that is what I will be using these canned diced tomatoes for. Back in the day when I lived in Kansas, I used to follow the blog Food in Jars, and I'm pretty sure she's still around and has a cookbook and all kinds of things, but she was the first person who I saw talking about, small scale canning and canning in pots other than a canner, and just small batches and not having to, fill up the entire giant thing every single time. So Today I just have a wire rack down in the bottom of this soup pot and just need to make sure I get an inch of water above these. And I'll do a small batch of tomatoes in here. Today is August 5th and I have a really busy day, and so I decided to have my kids help me pull these onions, these Walla Walla onions, to start curing. And I was leaving them outside until I realized it was going to rain. And so then we came and brought them in the garage, and so laid them out to cure until the tops get nice and dry. Today is August 6th and it is a Sunday, and so I was trying to decide what I wanted to work on today that was a more Sabbath friendly preserving activity, and I decided to go and grab the last of my cabbages that I grew from my spring garden, and they are all beautiful and large and I am so pleased with them, and I decided to bring those in and work on my sauerkraut today. That way I could sit at the kitchen table and work on slicing the cabbage, but still be around my family and be there if they needed me, and not be completely distracted from spending time together as a family on this Sunday. Sauerkraut is one of those things that we started to eat after we started gardening. Sometimes that's what you do. You figure out what you can grow and what you can have success growing, and you figure out ways to enjoy it. So my sauerkraut recipe uses 5 pounds of cabbage, which this one head of cabbage happened to be 5 pounds. So I went ahead and just chopped up this one head of cabbage, 3 tablespoons of pickling salt, and I used some caraway seeds as well, and juniper berries if I have them, but I didn't have them today. Now this I'm going to cover, and it starts to just release all of its own juices because of the salt, and I'm going to let it release some more juices, and then I will pack it into those half-gallon jars that I bought. That is my first week of preserving in the Every Bit Counts challenge. I started to work on a list of a lot of other projects that I have, things that I will need to work on later this month. Don't forget to subscribe and come back next time.